farmers aren't super vocal about a farm bill just because it sounds good, because they want a bill with farm on it. But when those are outdated, that safety net is lower. There's a lot more room to fall. And with the price of inputs that farmers are paying that very much are impacted by these tariffs, then that even furthers the gap. I've had very difficult phone calls the last 3 or 4 weeks of farmers not getting crop loans, bankruptcy, real hearings at local courtrooms, and bankers calling me and saying they're not going to be able to extend credit to our members, and us trying to find other means for them to stay in business.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Louisiana Farm Bureau podcast. I'm your host, Karl Wiggers, and today it is Monday, April 7th, and I am joined by Andy Brown. Andy Brown has been probably pretty busy, I'm guessing, with some phone calls related to the topic today. The topic today is tariffs, trade, drama. There's plenty of it out there, it seems like, in the world. I've seen my feed has been pretty busy, as yours, is your Instagram, Facebook, phone feed, all look kind of crazy.
I subscribe to Politico and other things for the job, so my email has been blowing up today pretty heavily, and last week as well. But I will point out, I'm disappointed. We're outside of March. I thought Allie might hold over to host this podcast, so
sorry.
I'm upset that I'm outside of Allie's reign as host. But
she may return. I'm glad you listened to know that Allie's been hosting, but she may be returning. For any listeners that are out there disappointed to hear my voice, she'll be back.
Glad to have you back, Karl. I'm glad to be back on with you.
Shucks. Well, I've already said it, but tariffs, trade, it's been a busy, probably week. Really, honestly, I think we've talked about this. We've kind of known in the world of ag that this was coming. That was a lot of what Donald Trump ran on in his campaign, and farmers, I've had conversations with them knowing that this is coming. We were talking about farm bill, like, hey, we need a farm bill because there's talks of tariffs. We got to get something straight. We're here. Tariffs are here. Liberation Day was April 2nd, according to Donald Trump, and he's unveiled a long list of tariffs and trade changes. What's that? What do you like? Said all that. Do you want to go ahead and give us a big disclaimer that we don't have all the answers?
It's as you know, when you record anything, podcast, or when I do a piece for Twilo with y'all or whatever, things can move quickly. And of all things, this tariff target and who all is impacted and how it plays out is very hard to keep up with. So what I say today might be outdated tomorrow, but it has gotten hot and heavy enough. And not just with one particular country, maybe like the last administration was pretty targeted to China. We seem to be taking a broader brush approach with this Trump administration. But yes, as you pointed out, he ran on that he was going to make America great again, just like he tried to do last time, and kind of doubled down on that. And, well, just like he said he was going to do, here we are with an even bigger swing at the trade ball, and we're seeing it fast and furious. So yeah, Rose Garden announcement on the 2nd to today has been quite the flurry of different ideas on how this is going to play out.
Yeah, so we talked about this actually a little bit in January on an earlier podcast that I will link in the show notes if you want to go listen to it. It was with a farmer and a banker at an Ag Outlook conference where we're talking about this kind of thing coming in trade and market prices and whatnot. But we talked about it then that this is something that farmers knew was coming. And you've been hearing from farmers even before April 2nd. And you were on a farm this morning with Avery over in West Baton Rouge Parish. What are you hearing from just the farming community, our membership out in the field at Ag Appreciation Days? What are you hearing from farmers about this?
Well, I think if you remember back to that podcast, there was some optimism in the room because the price of corn had run up a little bit. And, this is just a good example. If you just look at both our corn planting intentions and the price of corn. Farmers know what they're doing. They do this for a living, and so they track a lot of this trade talk, and that's why you've seen corn go through the roof, because it's not as big of a target or a victim of some of these negotiations as, say, maybe soybeans. If you talk to our marketing guys, it's gone through the floor since last week. So all that to say, we knew this was coming. What exactly was coming, we didn't know. But here we are today, and I think that's also reflective of the response we're seeing from our members. They're still optimistic. They're still hopeful that, and just excited that somebody is taking up for them, for our country, and what they experience in the way that they work in a worldwide market. Now a lot of the consumers are seeing that in a different light than maybe they understood before. So our members are generally supportive of all this, even though they're one of the biggest victims of the retaliation that happens from it. But ultimately it wasn't sunshine and rainbows before April 2nd in terms of the farm economy, and it certainly isn't now. But they're willing to take that medicine to hopefully get to a better result at the end of the day.
Let's just be clear. Farmers aren't glad that consumers are also now feeling it, but this is nothing new for farmers to feel this risk that's maybe, or the pains from the market that they have no control over.
Yeah, I mean,
consumers, we're just a little bit more insulated from it because global market doesn't really affect us and our businesses day to day as much as farmers.
Yeah, and talking to you or like Avery this morning is a little different because y'all understand it and visit with our members more often. But when I've had these other media requests, I mean, they come into it just expecting that I'm going to say our farmers are just devastated and we're about to go out of business, or that they want to go to D.C. to try to protest against all this, and that's not the case. And we even get, I mean, this is our podcast, so I'll be honest about it. I mean, you get a lot of those folks in that mindset don't understand it, and so they think the farmer is ignorant, like, well, you're just following the President Trump because you're a Republican. Well, I don't believe that to be true. I think our members are savvy enough to understand that they need a better deal negotiated. Now, do they all agree with this kind of Trump signature way of doing things, or we just come at it with a sledgehammer? Some do, some don't. But at the end of the day, when you try to sum it up, to talk to you about it today, they are at least glad that somebody's going to bat and trying to make positive changes for something we've been asking for, which is better trade deals and a more fair playing field to grow and sell our products worldwide.
Well, let me ask you this. I didn't put this, it's not in my notes. I didn't prep you for this, so buckle up. Mm-hmm. But for someone that maybe is not doing ag, like we're not ag commodity trading, or how has it been unfair? What is that kind of, I guess, can you give me the third grade level or eighth grade level? Like, what's that, how has that looked for farmers up to today? We mentioned the past 4 or 5 years have been pretty rough economy-wise, and what's trade look like in that regard?
Well, you got to let's just start at the farm level. We call them commodities for a reason. So most of agriculture is producing a raw product that is sold off the farm, which is where the farmer makes their money. Then it has to go to some sort of middleman, whether it's processing or just trades through a few hands along the supply chain. But everyone seems to forget the COVID years where everybody buckled down and understood that there is a supply chain to get something from a farm or a manufacturer to your store shelf. That still exists, and that's where a lot of the unfair pieces begin to start, kind of layering up, where we're sending our strength as a nation is in agriculture, is in energy, is in things that are a raw product. We're abundant in our natural resources. That's why people wanted to claim this country as their own, and there were wars over it. Is not just because it was America the Beautiful. It's because there's real assets here that we leverage as a country. So start there just kind of with Civics 101. But then when you start talking about unfair trade practices, we have more regulation, we have different labor laws, we have just a totally different cost structure that goes into turning that raw product into a consumable in this country than you see across the world. So that's one big shortcoming or unfair piece of the puzzle. The other part is, if you dig into it, and this is a good place to plug Betty's article, our economist with American Farm Bureau, but a lot of these countries already have tariffs on the U.S. that we don't reciprocate with when the product comes back to our country. We're a developed enough nation where we can buy those products, our dollar's strong enough, and still live with their tariff that they put on us to deliver that product back to the American consumer at a more reasonable price. But other countries don't play by those rules, and so it puts our farmers trying to enter those markets at an unfair advantage when you compare us to other folks around the world. And then that's where you get into discussions of trade wars, because this is a part of, sometimes bigger political schemes or true allies in war, or, global peace, if you will. People got to eat. People want energy. All these things are important. And so you see countries try to restrict those things or play a game with those important necessities of life to dictate where they rank, kind of in the geopolitical space.
So just to make sure I understand this right, just for giggles, I guess, let's just say, so 1,000 bushels of soybeans are sold to China, and we're paying a tariff to sell them that raw soybean, and then
we're not paying the tariff to import that into China. They would have to pay a tariff to buy a U.S. soybean.
Okay. But then we're having to pay.
But they may not pay the same tariff if they buy a Brazilian soybean. So it incentivizes that importer in China to buy Brazilian over buying U.S.
Okay.
And that's what you're seeing now and that's why the president called his tariffs reciprocal tariffs, because he felt that countries already had tariffs on the U.S. So we're just meeting y'all where what y'all are doing to us. Those tariffs do exist out there, where they try to play favorites with other countries and don't necessarily want their country consuming from America, because that helps our economy, which strengthens us in a global position. So if you put a tariff on U.S. soybean and you don't on a Brazilian soybean, and honestly, I don't even remember what the tariff rate is on Brazil. They're a huge competitor of ours in that space. So if I'm a buyer and I just need to feed hogs in China and I can get a cheaper soybean from Brazil, it's a widget, it's a commodity, it's a like product, then I'm probably going to buy from Brazil over the U.S. Now, there's enough demand there that they can't solely buy from other countries, so that's where you see we still ship a whole lot of soybeans to China. But then, yes, that's where it multiplies, is they buy those soybeans, they feed it to hogs, and then we buy pork products from China.
And we're paying tariffs on that.
We can pay. And again, when we get into specifics,
I know
check the numbers, but or the actual tariffs, but just using examples, that's where we're at a even more disadvantage.
And farmers are smart enough to recognize that. They're smarter than me.
And it's not always ag product to ag product. That's why this gets super complicated, where you start talking about steel or you start talking about auto imports. Or the negotiators of this, the State Department and U.S. Trade Representative, and it's all pieces on a chessboard that they're moving to try to ultimately get where they can live with one another. So it may be, for Canada and Mexico, their auto manufacturing in Mexico has risen, so they're really protective over what we do to their, importing of automobiles. But, they're also very important on shipping fruits and vegetables to the U.S. as well. So it's all an ebb and flow of what you'll give up to, give to get, kind of.
Try and keep it fair. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of that world. So
I was just balance. That's why, you call it a trade balance and you try to make all these things work together. But the first target of a lot of countries when they want to push back against what the U.S. is doing is to restrict ag imports into their country, because they know how loud and vocal and powerful the American farmer is in our country, both politically and just economically. And so we're a huge target of those countries to come after, and they try to go survive on somebody else's corn and soybean from elsewhere.
Well, this kind of, I guess, leads to if farmers are going to be that very valuable chess piece and the farm trade in that global trade discussion, where's the protection? for those farmers when that happens, when the battle comes to the farmer's doorstep. And they're the ones taking the medicine, as you said earlier.
Yeah, and this is where, we can go back to those previous podcasts and the voter voice campaign. And it's farmers aren't super vocal about a farm bill just because it sounds good, because they want a bill with farm on it. It's real impact, and it's a real thing that is in turn because we didn't get a farm bill done and we have outdated safety net reference prices and all these things that we won't re-explain today. But when those are outdated, that safety net is lower. There's a lot more room to fall. And with the price of inputs that farmers are paying that very much are impacted by these tariffs, then that even furthers the gap between breaking even and going out of business.
I was about to say, not even not paying bills, but going out of business.
Yeah, and that's I don't want to skip over the fact that because that didn't get done back in the fall, and Congress has failed to do that a few years in a row, I've had very difficult phone calls the last 3 or 4 weeks of farmers not getting crop loans. Bankruptcy, real hearings at local courtrooms, and bankers calling me and saying they're not going to be able to extend credit to our members, and us trying to find other means for them to stay in business. That is very real, and it is happening. Thankfully, we've been able to find some Band-Aids for bullet holes and keep some folks afloat through the ECAP program, and so that brings us back to what can we do to, in this instance, for those that are worried about where the price of soybeans has gone in the last week or whatever. And again, our members seem to be optimistic, because last time that the Trump administration attempted these kind of things, they implemented a safety net program that had never been done before, called the Market Facilitation Program. So we are working on that too. We're counting on some way to survive this, but we're not quite there yet. We're still sorting out what are the impacts, who's at play, what commodities are the most injured by these negotiations.
And before we started recording this, you actually mentioned that that's part of that disclaimer you said earlier. Like, one of the things that's tough about talking about this kind of stuff is it can change quick. And April 2nd may look different than today, April 7th, but it also may look very different by April 22nd. So who knows what will change and how necessary some of this will be. I guess nothing's safe to say, but is it likely that we'll need some level of that kind of disaster program or MFP type of thing come the fall?
But Karl, we knew December 31st, when we had the result of ECAP and no farm bill to go with it, we knew we'd probably be back in Congress this year asking for more assistance. It's just the reality.
This is just another part of that need.
Yeah, this has just amplified that and got a few more eyes on it, and it'll have an even bigger political spin to it. But the reality is for a lot of commodities, not all of them, cattle market's still looking really good. The protections we have with the sugar program and their consistency still looking really good. I mean, there are caveats to this, but both of those products, we consume most of what we produce in our own country. That's the big question with these tariffs, and that's what you hear from the Trump administration is, well, we'll just consume more of it ourselves.
Yeah.
And that we have to kind of pause and question. But ultimately, our members know, and that's why I think, that's what I'm hearing, is once a corn seed goes in the ground, they're going to put their head down and try to do the best they can to produce the most corn out of that one seed, the most bushels as they possibly can. They do that every single year. They have to, play the market. They have to play, their price takers on their inputs that goes into that crop.
Pray for good weather.
So none of this is new to them. That's why you don't see the shock for our members that, these other media outlets that are coming to me looking for that shock and awe. It's just not there, because that's the life the farmer leads every day, and now the consumer is having to get a little taste of that. I don't say that because we want to see the consumer suffer. They buy our products too.
We're consumers.
Yeah, and so are farmers.
Yeah,
so there will be, difficulties from that, but ultimately, at the end of the day, we want to see a better long-term outcome. So we need a long-term farm bill, and we need long-term trade deals, and then, maybe we'll be quiet for a little while.
Well, and we were talking about farm bill earlier. I wrote notes because I am admittedly behind on the news of this. I'm just not as up on this stuff as you are. I don't get all the Politico emails over the weekend. But when we were talking about farm bill and safety nets, like me as a consumer, as someone who has retirement accounts, I was like, oh man, this sucks. Like, that's not something that just farmers are feeling, and farmers feel it all the time. You just said this, but as consumers, we would be like, hey, wait, where's the stopgap here for my investments? And that's the same thing that farmers are asking for in a farm bill. So I guess can you compare those two, I guess, personal protections for like just plain old consumers and the same protections that farmers have been looking for years?
Yeah, here's the playbook that Farm Bureau uses for farmers, and you certainly can use it as a consumer. It's just typically we don't see consumers get this active in their advocacy efforts. But we don't strictly ask for bailouts or other assistance measures. That's not all we ask for. We're just as involved in asking for things to ease this pain in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act extension that Congress is going to take up this year. There's many other ways that the consumer can say, hey, White House, hey, Congress, this is impacting me. So you need to find a way to make this livable for me in the meantime. Is it going to come in the form of some sort of government assistance? Probably not a direct payment. Mm-hmm. But maybe you can push them hard enough politically to find you a tax break, or maybe you can figure out ways to change your consumption habits to ease that pain on your family. It's an ebb and flow. That's what the farmer's having to do. He's having to decide how much nitrogen he's going to put on that corn. Does he have to back off on that to make ends meet? That's nothing that any consumer wants to have to do. But if you really want to see the price of things level off, or at least feel like you have the same great American advantage, the American dream that we all hope for, then sometimes you gotta work for it. And this is a way that all of us are feeling that a little bit. Mm-hmm. So the other option is just don't look at your 401k and don't trade stocks for a few weeks. And
that's what Josh told me the other day earlier. He's like,
I'm not a financial guru in the least, so don't ask me about your investments. But if you trade in soybeans, maybe I can be a little help on that.
Well, we've kind of talked about this already, but Farm Bureau is clearly aware of this and working on this. You mentioned AFBF. They have some great articles. They're staying way up to date on this. They're putting out a lot of stuff on their market intel. We will link all that in our show notes. But Andy, I guess what are the next days and weeks looking like for you and for us here at Farm Bureau? And I guess what's happening on our end?
Well, we don't sit idle by and just wait. You're going to hear, you've already heard it from Secretary Rollins. You'll probably hear it from other farm leaders across the country of, well, we just have to wait and see. I think Senator Bozeman said the same last week. We'll just have to wait and see what the impacts of this are and quantify those down the road. That is true, but we already know some things, see where this may be headed, like we're already working to try to find a way to get the CCC fund, that the MFP program, sorry for the alphabet soup, but that's the funding mechanism that happened for market facilitation last time. Well, there was some mistakes made in the appropriation process, and it only has $3 billion in it of the $30 billion that it should have. So we're working on Congress to try to figure out a solution there. We're also constantly, it's not necessarily Farm Bureau, but a lot of the commodity groups have trade arms of their organizations. They're working really hard to try to maintain trade relationships globally. There's a lot of work that goes into trying to make this happen for farmers, and all those people certainly are not just sitting and waiting to see what comes of this. Lastly, we don't have farm bill fatigue enough to not be working on it, and we're continuing to look at every option including budget reconciliation, including September 30th appropriations deadline, and on down the calendar of where is going to be the time to turn back up that throttle on Farm Bill. It's not today, so you're not hearing as much about it, but every message that we have out of this organization, anything dealing with Washington, D.C., is going to have the words Farm Bill attached to it until it passes. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, that's our Alamo where we'll try to dig in at.
I mean, this is a perfect example of, like we've said, why we need one.
Yep.
Like, this is just bolstering that case when we go to Congress with that, when that throttle does go up. So I appreciate it. Andy, thank you. Is there anything else we need to make sure we get out there about what's going on in the tariffs world or in this issue?
I mean, I have to live in a bipartisan world, so I don't, and there probably is some members of ours out there that are already feeling this and very concerned about the price of their soybeans. So we're not, a lot of this was positive about it because we just don't like to live in a negative world. There are real concerns and there are real issues that come from trade wars. That's why it's called a war. There can be casualties in this, business casualties, hopefully at the worst of it. But we know it's causing uncertainty. But I tend to try to reflect the mentality of our members, and for a bulk of our crops and commodities, the only thing they can do right now is put their head down, plant a crop, raise a crop to the best of their ability, keep trying to market their cattle, keep plowing sugar cane. And we'll see where we get in the fall. Mm-hmm. And if there's a need there, we'll be prepared to go and ask for it.
Well, I know you're going to be working on it, and we probably will be coming out with some stuff from this department as well. I know there will be a story in this week's episode of Twyla. If you want to watch that, we'll link that in the show notes after it comes out. So if you're listening to this week, you may not see that yet, but if you come back to it next week or so, that'll be in there. We'll link all of the information, the articles that we talked about from American Farm Bureau in our show notes. You can read those. They have a lot more. We didn't get into many numbers. They have plenty of numbers in those market intel reports, and you can learn a lot more about what American Farm Bureau is doing and how this affects farmers, not just in Louisiana, but across the country. For all of us here at Louisiana Farm Bureau, thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Like it, share it with a friend, and subscribe so you can make sure you see it again next week. We'll see you right here next week on the Louisiana Farm Bureau podcast.